On today's American Football Stories episode, the Big Ten's back. We'll give you the full reactions from our point of view, and we'll walk you through what other people are saying around the country. American Football Stories is brought to you by CoachPaint. CoachPaint offers the ability to clearly illustrate video while increasing retention of information in a shorter amount of time. Up your game today with CoachPaint.
What time is it? Game time! It's gonna be special. They gonna talk about this forever.
Welcome to American Football Stories.
Puts his head down, crashes and spins, and dives. Touchdown!
Bringing together the many perspectives that make up college football in the NFL.
Football is one of the greatest sports ever invented.
From players and coaches.
Believe, baby, believe, baby.
Hey, we playing to win right here, fellas.
To the front office and scouts.
The public is finally beginning to catch up, but they don't even know half the truth.
Us against the world, let's get it.
Your hosts, Robert Parker and Nick Knudsen, bring you American Football Stories.
Welcome to the American Football Stories podcast brought to you by CoachPaint. Today is September 19th, 2020. I'm Nick Knudsen. I'm joined by my co-host, Robert Parker. You ready to go, Rob? You got some Big Ten football back in action. All of a sudden, starting to feel like a real season here.
It's starting to feel that way, Nick, and I'm excited to dive in about some Big Ten football. So I'm ready to go. I'm ready to rock and roll.
I hope you give us some Camels, and Coastal Carolina Chanticleers updates as we go. So what's the score right now? What's the score you got right now over there?
We got Coastal up right now, 21-9.
21-9. All right. We'll keep an eye on that game for everybody. I'm sure they're very interested in what's going on in the Campbell Coastal Carolina game. All right. So we're going to go off. We're going to have a little bit more of a reaction, a little bit more of a fluid episode. We're normally a little structured in this tonight, but we felt it was important to get our take out in there on the Big Ten football returning. And we're going to go through. We're going to work through a couple different articles here. So the Chicago Tribune had some good questions that I think most people are asking. The first question, what's the schedule going to look like? So each team's going to play at least 8 games, and 2 crossovers are going to be determined. They're going to make the schedules within the next week here. But my understanding is the day of the championship game, or at least the last week of the season. First off, they're leaving it open that the championship game might be on a campus site. But the last game of the season is going to be you play the same seed in your division. So if you're the number 2 team in the West, you play the number 2 team from the East. You play the same seed in the opposite division. I'm sorry, I said that incorrectly. So 7th place plays 7th place, first place plays first place, down the line. I think that's an interesting idea.
I think that's a great idea, Nick. But one thing that the Big Ten has going against them is, I'm excited the Big Ten is coming back. We're definitely going to have, one of the Big Ten teams going through, participating in the college football playoff. But once again, with the 8-game, 9-game schedule that the Big Ten is preparing, I just want to know, what are those dates going to look like if some of those games have to be postponed or canceled, unlike the other conferences who started earlier that has those dates, put in their schedules to make up. So I think that's one thing that's disadvantage that the Big Ten has going against them.
Yeah, even the SEC starting a little later, but the SEC kind of picked that sweet spot where they could still give a couple of buys to their teams. And with the Big Ten, you're virtually guaranteed that there's going to be some cancellations this year. It's not a question really of if. It's just a matter of who and how many times it's going to happen. So the big issue you can go at the Big Ten for right now is, okay, you did it. You came around to the party a little late. You finally did it. But you really put your back against the wall here. There's no room for error in this schedule.
Yeah, I think you're right, Nick. It's definitely no room for error when it comes to the schedule. And perfect example, we've seen the Baylor and Houston game get postponed this week. We saw the Charlotte in North Carolina game get postponed this week. And I know those teams are looking for makeup days. But once again,
Right.
it's early in the collegiate season where, okay, well, if we postpone a game, we can make it up down the road. But we have the Big Ten talking about a October 23rd, 24th start date.
Mhm.
I don't know how many, open days that they're going to have between there and college football playoffs to kind of, play games if they get postponed.
Yeah, and I think you look at it as a situation where, like, on the one hand, you can be critical and you can look at it like I think I came across a little critical in my opening statement on it, but it's great that you're trying. At least you watch it. You see Clemson play last week. You see North Carolina play last week. And yes, there are games being canceled, but there's plenty of games going on this weekend. There's really no excuse to not play. I think the bigger issue I have right now, Robert, is what we kind of talked about in the preseason ended up being spot on. Why, if you're the Big Ten, do you go out on this limb? Is there just a little bit of an air of superiority to you? I mean, at least that's what it looks like from the outside. Like, hey, we're going to set the tone and make this decision and kind of force everyone's hand. Because it's clear that at least 3 of the Power 5 conferences were not on board with that decision.
Yeah, exactly. To me, it seemed like, the Big Ten, got scared off from, certain reports that came out there, and especially in regards to the health and safety of the players when it came to the certain heart condition that was, spiking because of the COVID-19 infection. But once again, we talked about it on the previous pods. If the Big Ten was privy to that type of information, wouldn't you think the SEC and ACC and the other
Right.
conference was privy of that same information? So
Yep.
if they could start, I just don't see why the Big Ten kind of waited. But once again, Kevin Warren came out and said, hey, their safety and testing protocols got better. They gained more information and more knowledge between when they made the decision the first time. And if that holds true, then you kind of tip your hat off to them. But you just wish it was stated a little bit better, especially to the players and the parents and the teams and coaches.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that we're going to look back on with the Big Ten in this situation, and really, I mean, the parallels of what's gone on in the country the past year, it's kind of a little uncanny. But there's just the communication from the top's been terrible. It was not good. Like parents, coaches, people didn't seem to know what was going on. I have a feeling that a little bit of what we're hearing is people having no issue just throwing Kevin Warren under the bus. My gut feeling is that Kevin Warren very much acted in the interest of his conference and in the interest of his university presidents. And I think he did what they wanted to do. He stepped up. He made what appeared to be a tough call. And it's like we said, too, we call this as well, Robert. We said it's a little bit at the time, go back to August here, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Because if you go out and play, people are critical. You're putting their safety at jeopardy. These guys are unpaid, at least pay them. Like there's all types of arguments that were going on. And you had attempts, maybe a little subtle attempts at not so subtle. I guess they just put it directly on Twitter, but what looked to be the beginnings of unionization among the college athletes, among the student athletes from the Pac-12 really stem from the Pac-12 We Are United demands. It was a little all overwhelming at once, wasn't it, in August, just to reset the scene? This wasn't like a decision that came out of nowhere in defense of the Big Ten, right?
Yeah, I mean, once again, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that, Kevin Warren was definitely, probably the fall guy. He was the guy that,
Probably.
had to hold the weight of the conference on his shoulders.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think they got this right. I think we're going to look back at this and we're going to look at Kevin Warren and we're going to say, hey, I think the parents and, the players and the coaches and everyone in the conference was upset at first. But I think down the line, they're going to really go to Kevin Warren and say, hey, thank you for, putting our safety and health out there and doing the best for us. We appreciate that. Maybe at the time we didn't see it. It's it's kind of like that parent that tells you, hey, don't do that, and you always wonder why. Hey, you can't go out with certain friends. Hey, why not, mom or dad? And then you go out and something happens, and then you're like, oh, okay, well, thank you, mom, for having my safe and healthy in perspective and looking out for me. So I think that's the same thing that we're going to see with Kevin Warren as the Big Ten commissioner moving forward.
Yeah, I think you look at it and it's a situation where there's no protocol for this. There's no one way to do it. My biggest criticism was, dude, communicate. Like, talk to not to your parents and coaches. I'm not even talking about that, which sounds like they didn't even do a good job in that aspect at first. But why does the Big Ten need to do something totally different, like than the SEC and the Pac-12 and the ACC? It just, everybody was so on their own planet, and in some respects that's good, but in some respects you would have liked to see them all get together and make a decision on that before you just go out and make your own decision, because that's what it looks like. And that's the part I was super critical of with the Big Ten. Understood why they're doing it. Totally can back up those reasons at the time. They were worried about testing. They're worried about a lot of other things. So it is convenient that we have new rapid testing available. But do you see that as a nice, convenient thing to fall back on, to point to, if you're the Big Ten, and not say, oh, we made a huge mistake? It's more like, oh, well, now there's rapid testing available.
Yeah, that's kind of a tricky situation. I think the rapid testing being available helps a lot, not only for the Big Ten, but for other conferences as well. But it makes you think, well, if the Big Ten is just now getting this rapid testing, what did the other conference have? What was the other conference using this rapid testing protocol and process as well, or were they doing something on their own? And so that kind of makes you wonder. But at the end of the day, I think the Big Ten is in a good position moving forward. I think this is definitely not the darkest days of the Big Ten.
We'll get there.
But we will get there. But once again, Nick, I just think we talked about Kevin Warren being the fall guy. We talked about the parents protest, and we talked about the players protest, and we talked about the coaches, kind of throwing the conference, under the bus. We had Scott Frost come out, make a couple comments. We've seen Ryan Day be so vocal on social media. We've seen Harbaugh. So we've seen a lot of these, top tier coaches in the Big Ten come out and make statements to have a season. And I think we're finally getting that. And I think everyone can woosah a little bit and sit down and actually, flip on the TV and enjoy some Big Ten football moving forward.
Yeah, I'm glad that they didn't stick to their guns on this. I'm glad they actually took the temperature of the environment around them and realized, oh, hey, look at all these people playing football. The state of Ohio is watching their high school kids play football, but the Buckeyes aren't playing football. I mean, is it ideal to play this year? Nothing about this year is ideal, but I think that if there's an appetite for it among the players and coaches, I think that's really the key thing. You can no longer point to the argument of, hey, these kids aren't being paid. Like, that argument's dead. You can't talk about that anymore, because the guys clearly want to play. And I've been impressed with the voices that have come up out of this situation. I don't think it's a super reckless decision anymore. I think we've seen what's gone on. You got a couple months of NFL training camp under our belts. We got some college football teams that played 3 games. I think there's been over 1,000 high school football games too. There's plenty of record to point to now. We're not venturing into the great unknown as much as we were, a month and a half ago when they were making this decision. Only school I really heard kind of still kicking, and might have been dragged kicking and screaming a bit, was Rutgers, Robert. Rutgers is in New Jersey. Tell us a little bit about the environment in New Jersey. Like, it's a little behind the rest of the country in terms of opening, isn't it?
Actually, Nick, Rutgers is kind of in my backyard. New Jersey, the governor really kind of, shut things down when the pandemic really hit. And he slowly opened back up. Probably in the last couple of weeks, everything is kind of slowly opening back up. But on the football front, I've heard reports that Rutgers was definitely not, too happy about the Big Ten, making a move to come back to have a fall season. But once again, when you're playing Rutgers football, I don't think you're happy for any season. So with that being said, I think Rutgers eventually will hop on board. And another thing is that in Rutgers campus, they're having a lot of virtual classes, so not a lot of students on campus. I know at Syracuse, for example, they were kind of doing hybrid classes where they're going to have a certain number of kids on campus, and then they're going to do virtual learning for the rest of the semester. But Rutgers kind of, went with the virtual program all the way through and said, hey, we're not going to let people on campus. We're just going to have virtual classes. So I think, different states and different governors was affecting, football play moving forward. And you see that with the Pac-12, where, the Pac-12 has certain restrictions that the Big Ten, SEC, and ACC doesn't have just because of the state that they play in. So I think that was definitely a hindrance to a lot of, football moving forward, depending on the state that you were in.
Yeah, whereas, you look at the Big Ten broad geography, right? Like, the state of Nebraska is, they've been hovering around the 600, or has it even been 600? 641, it looks like it spiked at in May. On May 8th, they reported 648 cases in the state of Nebraska. Of course, Nebraska Cornhuskers, Big Ten institution. State of New Jersey, quite a different story, man. I mean, so it's like you see reactions from different presidents, and they're really just kind of reflecting what's going on in the backyard, and you really can't blame Rutgers for being concerned when – I mean, Robert, I think you just told me you went to a restaurant for the first time since March, like last week or a week or two ago, right?
Yeah. Once again, just like I mentioned before, our governor just kind of he did a slow open process, and I think right now we're still in phase 4. We're not full phase 5. Gyms just started opening a week ago. Indoor dining for restaurants a week ago. So we're still getting there compared to a lot of states that I have friends in, where I talk to them pretty frequently, and they're saying, hey, it felt like nothing never changed down here or over here. So I think Rutgers is just one of those universities that was definitely taking the temperature of everything that was happening in the state. So I think that's a decision where Rutgers is not too enthused about having a football season this fall. But once again, the Big Ten is the Big Ten, and Ohio State is the Ohio State University. So it's kind of like what Ohio State wants, Ohio State gets, and that's the only national contender title that can come out of the Big Ten, if you ask me, is the Ohio State Buckeyes. So so we shall see, Nick, moving forward, like what's going to happen as far as the college football playoffs, just universities in general, the scheduling with the Big Ten. It's a lot to look out for in the next couple of weeks.
Well, not everybody was thrilled with the decision, and I think the most traction I saw on Twitter from a reaction on the negative side was Christine Brennan's article in USA Today. Christine Brennan, columnist, national, international sports columnist for USA Today. She's commentator on ABC News, PBS NewsHour, National Public Radio, and has written 7 books. Just read her bio there. Didn't know that off the top of my head. But we're gonna do something a little different here. We're gonna go through. I'm gonna read her entire article on this because I think it's important to hear from both sides, and I'll get your take on it, Robert. So she starts off, for decades, the Big Ten has thought of itself as a different kind of sports conference, one that proudly touts the academic achievements and Great Lakes values of its like-minded, highly regarded, internationally ranked research institutions. The Big Ten wasn't the SEC. It wasn't the Big 12. It was better than that, and it was happy to tell you all about it. Quick aside, Robert, have you ever heard the phrase Great Lakes values?
I have not. Maybe you're going to have to elaborate on that.
Nope. I've never heard it. I would love to, but I've never heard it until just now. Okay, back to the article. As proof, one only had to look at the conference's prudent August decision to shut down fall sports in the midst of a global pandemic. It was only natural that the Big Ten would follow the Ivy League and that the Pac-12 would follow the Big Ten. It was a tough decision, heartbreaking and costly, but it was the right one. That's the Big Ten for you, concerned about science, medicine, and safety. Let the football factories of the SEC, Big 12, and ACC, Clemson's playground, continue playing. The Big Ten was doing the right thing, looking out for its student athletes, treating them almost no differently than the student body at large. And that was all that mattered. Robert, football factories. Do you think the University of Virginia would have an issue with that? Like, do you think the University of North Carolina, the University of Florida, the number 6 publicly ranked school, Vanderbilt? There's plenty of just football factories, plenty of good research institutions. I think our friend Christine's overlooking.
I think she's overlooking a lot of top tier public schools or top tier research schools that's not in the Big Ten. I mean, like, I know the Pac-12 is not in that scenario because the Pac-12 wasn't playing. But just go into the SEC. Hey, you got your Vanderbilt, you got the University of Florida. Once again, and go to the ACC, just like you said, you got your North Carolina Tar Heels, you got your Virginia Cavaliers. So it's plenty of schools out there that's just not a football factory or a basketball factory that gets the job done from an academic standpoint. So, I mean, I know the Big Ten has your Northwesterns, but once again, it's so many top tier schools outside of the Big Ten that it's just not based on being a football factory.
This is already starting so snooty because you put the Big Ten in the same league as the Ivy League. And let me tell you something, the Big Ten, it's got a lot of great schools, and I'm sure they compare to the Ivy Leagues on some regards. But the Big Ten, the Ivy League, like, nobody's like, oh, I went to Princeton, and then someone follows up by saying, like, I went to Michigan State, and people are like, oh, those are the same. Does anyone think that?
I never heard of that comparison. If you ask me, Nick, but
Michigan State would kick their ass on a football field, though.
Oh, definitely. But I think you're right in regards to the tone of the article coming off, kind of snooty in regards to, like, hey, we're this type of conference. We're not that type of conference. Right. And I think one of the greatest assets that the Big Ten has, if you ask me, is the unity, which we didn't see when the decision came down not to play. I think the Big Ten, shares revenue equally across the conference. So I think that's one thing that the Big Ten does that no other conference does. So I think that's one thing the Big Ten has going for them. But once again, the Big Ten is definitely not the Ivy Leagues. So if that article was saying, hey, Princeton, Yale, Columbia, we're not playing, which the Ivy League is not playing this fall season, then that's one thing. But to say that in regards to the Big Ten, I think that's kind of disingenuous a little bit, and definitely kind of come off as snooty, if you ask me, Nick.
All right. Well, so let's continue on here because we're about to ratchet it up another notch. Then came Wednesday, the darkest day in Big Ten sports history, the day the vaunted conference caved. It choked. It got scared. It became the SEC. I think SEC fans would take great offense to that line. And I'm not talking about actually being offended. I'm talking about comparing them in football. Comparing the football hey, listen. You could say a lot about the Big Ten and the SEC, but do not compare the Big Ten to the SEC. I think that's probably more the reaction you get. It has nothing to do with off the field stuff. Just don't compare them as football programs. The SEC fan would probably say comparing the Big Ten to the SEC on the football field is like comparing the Big Ten to the Ivy Leagues off the football field.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's the only way you're offending the SEC fan in general right there, in my opinion. All right, just as The Big Ten was looking smarter by the day as COVID-19 outbreaks popped up at Michigan State, Wisconsin, and Maryland, while other conferences playing football announced COVID-related postponements and soaring cases. The league's presidents reversed themselves and decided to steer their schools and their programs right into the teeth of what are predicted to be some of the worst days of the pandemic in October and November. And how are they doing it? With a mountain of daily antigen tests, special delivery for Big Ten football teams only, rapid tests for football players, but apparently not for the elderly in Ann Arbor or Columbus or Evanston, or for children and teachers in Bloomington or New Brunswick or Minneapolis, or for students paying their education amid the outbreaks in East Lansing or Madison or College Park. I mean, this is the same argument that gets mad that Nick Saban makes $9 million a year, what I just read. There's a reason why. There's a reason why they're getting the test. I don't understand. What's her problem? So she thinks she's concerned about safety, but the football players don't deserve to get tested? I don't understand the point here.
Yeah, that kind of went over my head. I mean, once again, they're student athletes, so right. And I think we had a conversation about this during our pre-show in regards to the money aspect of having a college football season. I think it's definitely not the elephant in the room. I think everyone kind of knows it's money first and everything else. And money drives that aspect. So if you have the money, you're gonna get the wide availability of the testing. So if you're a football player or a student athlete within the Big Ten Conference or any of these conferences, you're gonna get the available testing that you need. I don't think that the players and the students shouldn't. But to hear that argument, I think it's just kind of lost in translation. Especially I just don't like this article at all.
It's a BS argument because you're saying in this, you're directly saying, and I'm going to read this line again, rapid tests for football players, but apparently not for the elderly in Ann Arbor or Columbus or Evanston, or for school children and teachers in Bloomington or New Brunswick or Minneapolis, or for students paying their education amid the outbreaks in the East Lansing or Madison or College Park. Listen, one of the reasons why the Big Ten came back, even though I think it's a convenient excuse to fall back on, and they really actually just watch other people doing it, and they go, oh, we should play football now. But one of the biggest reasons scientifically they can fall back on was that Abbott, is a company that released this 15-minute, easy-to-use COVID-19 test. And they are going to be producing they're ramping up production right now to 50 million tests per month. So when she says this, rapid tests for football players, but not for the elderly, not for children, not for teachers, not for students, it's a garbage line. It's a throwaway line. It's not an either or thing. It's not like, hey, we need to give those tests to the football players and screw the elderly. That's not what's going on. So that's just complete false line right there. So argument's way off point right now. But let's continue, Robert, because you're having fun with this. All right. So how will this work? Smooth as silk, I'm sure. Let's look at Michigan State. The other day, all MSU students were asked to self-quarantine. And 30 large houses, including 23 fraternities and sororities, were ordered into mandatory quarantine after the school announced 342 new coronavirus cases. This is an urgent situation, Ingham County Health Officer Linda S. Vale said. The exponential growth of COVID-19 cases must stop. So, hey, Michigan State, let's start football. What could go wrong? Yo, this is just straight up it's not acknowledging the fact that is it a difficult situation right now? Yes. There are college cases. COVID cases are going up because students are back on campus. But was that expected, Robert? Wasn't that expected?
I mean, in my book, that was definitely expected. I mean, I think that was the argument that, was out there. Yeah, and in regards to, these are college kids, you go to college to get that college experience, whether it's partying, whether, it's hanging out with your friends, whether it's joining a sorority, joining a fraternity. Things are the things that we expect. And I understand the concern when you have a spike in, coronavirus cases on your campus. But once again, just like you said earlier, Nick, to say, okay, well, we have a spike on campus and we have this new antigen testing where we can test 15-minute tests and get the results back. Not only does I think that helps the football players, but I think that helps the campus as well.
Right.
Because I'm pretty sure some of those tests is going to go out to the campus as well, and for the student body as well. So
Yeah, there's 50 million a month. They're
Yeah.
widely available. This isn't like a thing where we have a shortage like at the beginning of this. They're widely available tests now. But I mean, they have students. Why isn't it? Where's the article? Is the article criticizing the fact that Michigan State has students on campus? No, she's criticizing the fact that there's coronavirus cases, which is what's going on in the world right now. In case I don't understand like how she. It's like she's surprised on this. Well, the students are on campus. It's bound to happen a little bit. I don't understand what her point is on that again. So, I mean, she's not making it up. She's giving numbers, but okay. So you're saying they caught it. Okay. Those are the cases. Fine. All right. So she goes on then to mock Ed Orgeron, where she quotes him as saying, Ed Orgeron, head coach at LSU. Here was LSU head coach Ed Orgeron's COVID strategy Tuesday. Not all of our players, but most of our players have caught it. I think that hopefully they won't catch it again, and hopefully they're not out for games. Yeah, Ed Orgeron doesn't have an expert strategy that he's laying out for the media, but I'm pretty sure LSU has a strategy of how to deal with their players. Do you? You think that?
I think so. I think all of these schools and universities, have a strategy. Once again, I think we saw it to a certain degree. We saw the UNC Charlotte North Carolina game get postponed because a few of the players on the Charlotte football team had to be quarantined and they couldn't play with enough offensive linemen. So I think that is the extreme where it's just saying, hey, we're going to quarantine these guys. We did the contact tracing. We know who has it. We know who the guy's been around. So we're just going to quarantine everyone. And if we have to postpone the game and set a date down the line,
Right.
That's what we'll do. But if not, then, it's inevitable. This is something that we're dealing with and we have to move forward with. So I think, LSU definitely has a strategy set up there amongst other schools. So once again, I just think, Ed Orgeron probably don't want to give out, the protocol that his kids has to go through week in and week out and day in and day in.
I'm sure they have, though. I'm sure they have. She's pulling one quote out of thin air. Like, I'm pretty sure they've shared that, what they're doing.
Yeah, but if you ask me, once again, I mean, LSU doesn't pay, Ed Orgeron to give, expertise and medical advice and put what's going on out there. So if you want to quote that, go to the source, go to LSU's medical staff and ask them what is their protocol, rather than taking a quote from Ed Orgeron and saying, hey, we hope our players don't get it. So once again, Nick, I this article is definitely snooty. We can use multiple words, but we're just gonna keep it there for right now.
I'm loving every second of it, though.
But it's once again, I'm so excited about the players getting what they want, and they want to come back and play, and they're getting an opportunity to do that. And we're gonna go in depth later on in the segment, and we're gonna talk about certain players opting back in. They opted out, but now they're opting back in, so that
because they want to play. They want to play,
and
right.
Not only that, they feel safer now when it comes to the proper protocol and the COVID testing.
Yes.
So I think that's a big jump that we have to look at compared to from when the Big Ten announced the cancellation of the season up until now. So once again, I think the Big Ten is doing a hell of a job moving forward with this, and we talked about it. I think they're finally getting it right.
Well, I'll wrap up shortly here. We got a few more paragraphs left, but she goes on, Christine goes on. This is the Nebraskaization of the Big Ten. Who would have thought when Nebraska and Ohio State and a few of the league's other squeakiest wheels started whining about missing out on football, the Big Ten presidents would buckle rather than stand up to them? Or we could call it the trumpeting of the Big Ten. Or it was just 2 weeks ago that Trump, desperate to win votes in Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, told the conference to play football. Originally, the league stood its ground. Rutgers president Jonathan Holloway aptly called it cheap politics. But wouldn't you know, the university presidents ended up following right along, giving Trump exactly what he wanted. That's probably a good phrase for this article, too, cheap politics. It's starting to feel that way reading this article. Look, it's clear that she has her opinion on this, but I don't know why be so upset about trying to find a way to make it work. I guess that's not what I'm understanding. I'm not understanding that part. There's like no shred of positivity in this article.
None whatsoever, Nick. And I think that's the thing. Like I understand her concern for the safety and welfare of, everyone involved, especially during the pandemic that we're suffered. But once again, it seems like everything gets coming back, normal in a certain sense. We have the rapid testing for the students on campus and the student athletes. So I think, some change is happening. So I think we just have to let that happen and kind of see what happens, the end result. But right now, everything is kind of, going in the right direction. But just like you said, no positivity within this article whatsoever.
Yeah. And this is someone, I went back and looked at her past article headlines. She wrote an opinion piece. I love college football, but just can't watch this season. Okay. So we know where she stands on it. But then she talks about as athletes find their voices, their reach is undeniable. And this was definitely a situation where Big Ten parents and Big Ten players, they use their voice to get this done. So she's a little all over the place on this. I get, I hate that this whole thing is so politicized and that we have to argue about science and reality on things. Like it creates a lot of mass confusion. And I think that clearly it's been demonstrated that players can play football and expect to be safe to some capacity. You're obviously taking a risk going out to the freaking grocery store still, but that's the society we're in right now. Like it's not any better in the grocery store than it is on the football field probably. So I just think that it's been proven time and time again that they can do this and keep it as safe as possible, and they'll adjust as they see fit. As the Big Ten, the players, the coaches, everybody will make their adjustments as they see fit. So I think it's important to try to be understanding with each other. And if someone wants to try to attempt to do something, hey, more power to them. Good luck. That's my take on it. Like, obviously, I share a concern. I understand her concerns, but there's just no ability to try to see it for what they're trying to accomplish, that they're trying to figure it out amongst the pandemic, amongst all the problems, because they're seeing other rays of light in different places. So I'm not going to fault someone for chasing something. And guess what? If you're uncomfortable, sit out. Sit out if you don't want to play. Nobody's going to fault you. I don't think anyone would fault these guys. But it's like you said, Robert, we're seeing players opt in. We'll start transitioning here. You had all these players opt out originally, especially from the Big Ten. And really some of the highlights, I mean, you look at the Maryland roster alone. What do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We got six guys. 6 guys off the Maryland roster. 3 guys out of Michigan. You got 4 guys Michigan State. Rashad Bateman, draft pick in the NFL. Rashawn Slater out of Northwestern, another draft pick. Shaun Wade, Wyatt Davis at Ohio State, Micah Parsons, Rondale Moore. But we're seeing some of these guys. So all these guys that opted out, there's 21 Big Ten players that opted out. We've already seen at Ohio State, Shaun Wade, Wyatt Davis, they want to come back. Rashad Bateman wants to come back. And we might have some precedent for that, Robert, right?
Yeah, we definitely might. I know pandemic year, COVID-19 year, 2020, it seems like, what rules? There isn't any rules. But when it comes down to these players opting in, I think we do have a little precedent. We had the kicker out of Arizona State last year. He declared for the NFL draft. He actually participated in the combine. However, he cited COVID and the pandemic and saying, hey, he wasn't eligible to practice and do everything that he needed to prepare to make an active roster. So
he did not get drafted, though.
He
right?
did not get drafted. That was the key. That was the key.
Right.
Him not getting drafted. So by him not getting drafted, he actually had an opportunity to come back for his senior year. And I think that's a lot of precedent out there that these players opting out that can use to get back in. I know some of these players might have signed a waiver with the agent. Some haven't, but once again, I think the NCAA is going to be flexible about this. I know Rashad Bateman actually enrolled back into classes on campus, so he's actually a student again. So right. we're going to see
2 years of eligibility too. They give
2 years of 2 years of eligibility. So I think we're going to see the NCAA be a little bit flexible in this scenario and kind of grant these players to opt back in. I mean, it's the right thing to do. If they want to opt back in, let them opt back in. Don't hold it against them to the fact that they opted out, because once again, it was no clarity for those guys in the Big Ten whether it was going to be a season or whether it wasn't going to be a season. Right. So once again, we talk about the student athlete. So let's help the student athlete in this regards and let them opt back in and play.
And what's your favorite line from the Pittsburgh Steelers general manager that you saw in an interview?
Yeah, I know we talked about this, in previous conversations before. We had the GM of the Pittsburgh Steelers saying, hey, I want to draft a guy where I can actually see play and have film on. So I think, certain guys opting back in, it bodes well for their draft stock, and it bodes well if they can put, great film, great game tape on film so they can get drafted even higher. So Shaun Wade opting back in, he might get drafted maybe higher. I mean, definitely he could have came out last year with Okudah and Arnett, his counterparts and his peers in the secondary, and got drafted in the first round. But, he decides to come back. He had a controversial targeting call in that Ohio State Clemson game in the playoffs that kind of got him ejected. So I think that left a sour taste in his mouth to come back and play again.
Well, and his dad, Randy Wade, was one of the loud voices of the Big Ten parents making some noise about the cancellation in the first place. He flew up to Chicago. He led protests. He went to Columbus. So his dad was Shaun Wade's dad was very active in basically raising a fuss about this to get people to pay attention. So you look at it. I do have confirmed via the Chicago Tribune here. Northwestern's Rashawn Slater, Minnesota's Rashad Bateman, Penn State's Michael Parsons, and Michigan's Jalen Mayfield, Ambry Thomas, and Nico Collins all signed with agents. Purdue's Rondell Moore, Ohio State's Shaun Wade did not. So you see some flexibility there.
That could be the ultimate, game changer. Those players who actually sign with the agent. If they took any, benefits, maybe they'll have to, give those benefits back. But once again, I really think, that the NCAA is going to be flexible, and we're going to tip our hats off to the NCAA being flexible and letting these players opt back in.
Yeah, but if they opt back in, that's one less test for that little old lady down the street from the Horseshoe.
Yeah, I mean, if you're reading that article, I'm pretty sure you might think that way. But once again, I think this is just the best thing to do to move forward, just like the Big Ten Conference is doing. Once again, we talked about it earlier in the segment, Nick. When you see Clemson and Wake Forest playing, when you see North Carolina and Syracuse playing, just like Ryan Day, he came out on social media and say, hey, my guys are watching these other teams play. Why can't we play? And I think that's what it kind of boiled down to, the fact that, other conferences are playing and they're doing it in the right way, and they're having their protocol and everything set up. So why can't the Big Ten? So once again, we see the the Power Five come out on top with the Big Ten coming back, and hopefully the Pac-12 joins suit. But we shall see.
Hey man, people are doing what they can do this year. It's a tough year, and that's why the Chicago Tribune article ends with one of the last questions: is does this permanently damage the reputation of Kevin Warren? I say absolutely not. I think it's a sign of a good leader that you can admit your mistake and turn around and say, "Hey, look, we made the decision based on." I mean, even he pointed to the rapid testing. And I'm sure that was, like I said, I'm sure that was part of the reason why they came back. But it's also a very nice thing to fall back on, say that's the reason, and you can base it on science and everything, and not just to say like, hey, we were looking around and we realized we made a mistake. But either way, the fact that you're not so firm on it, that you've proven that you can listen to your fan base and you can listen to your players and your coaches. Good on Kevin Warren. I'd give him. It was a rough start for him. But, man, what a year to start. I think it's got to be tough taking over as a commissioner of a conference anyway, but 2020 especially. So are we really going to hold that against him? That was 2020 and he was facing an unprecedented decision. Are we going to really be that hard on the guy? Give him a break, man. I think he did a good job here. Turn it around.
Yeah, I mean, the only knock for me in regards to the Kevin Warren situation, the Big Ten situation, is that we talked about it before, Nick, in regards to what was the rush. They could have waited,
Sure.
like
and that's what he's going to get crushed on. He's going to get crushed on that.
But in my opinion, in my my thought process, that's the only thing that I can kind of hold against him and the powers to be who made the decision to say, hey, we're going to cancel the season. We're not going to have a fall football season. That is my only thing in regards to that. Say, hey, why couldn't you wait to make that decision? What was the rush? Just like you said, like time cures everything. And over time, we get the rapid testing. So once again, Kevin Warren and the Big Ten could waited a little bit longer to figure out, hey, what are all the alternatives that we can do? What are the safety protocols and the proper procedures that we can take place? Hey, the SEC said they're gonna go along with the season. Let's partner up with the SEC and say, hey, what are you guys doing?
Yep.
So like we can do the same thing and we can be on the same page in one accord. So that's the only thing that I can really, hold against is the timing of everything. But once again, I think he comes out, on top looking pretty fairly well. I mean, the parents are happy. The players are definitely happy. I know you see Adrian Martinez, the quarterback of Nebraska, tweeted out he's ready to go. Once again, Sean Wade didn't even tell Ryan Day that he was opting back in. He only told his position coach and Wyatt Davis. So Justin Fields, another one who was very vocal about, the players want to play. He's happy. So I think you see a lot of players and a lot of coaches and a lot of fans and a lot of parents that's happy right now. So I think they're definitely going to give, Kevin Warren a pat on the back to get this show back on the road.
Well, I say all hail Nebraska, because without those crazy corn folk, man, I don't know if we have a season. They end up suing the Big Ten. Everything. God bless Nebraska. They earn their Big Ten stripes. If anyone was still looking at them as the new guy on the block, I think Nebraska fully earned their Big Ten stripes. We can take that Big 12 title off of that. They don't need that anymore. They're in the Big Ten now. They're in the Big Ten now.
Just don't tell Desmond Howard that, Nick.
Oh, I think he probably read Christine Brennan's article and was like, yeah, it's some great points in there. It's great points. Dude, I mean, my big problem is I don't like when people misrepresent the truth, and I think that article did a lot of that in order to make her point. She's making it seem like it's between Justin Fields and some lady down the street getting a test. That's just not going to be the case. That's not going to be the case. And I think that we're looking at overall in the country, depending on where you are, cases are all over the place around the country. So you can't treat it equal. I don't know where Christine Brennan lives, but I'd probably be willing to bet she probably lives in New York or D.C. based on the fact she writes with USA Today. So I have a feeling she's in a big metropolitan city on the East Coast, and I don't know if she's I don't know if she's that in touch with what's going on in the Big Ten. Like across, like You're calling it the Nebraskaization of the Big Ten? Yo, like I don't think the Big Ten was the Ivy League. Like I know there's good schools. Like Michigan, Ann Arbor is the number 3 public school in the country. Like I mean, there's some great schools in the Big Ten. Northwestern is obviously a private school, great school. That's where she went to school, by the way. So that's probably why she had some strong feelings about the Big Ten decision. But you look at it right now, and if the Pac-12 doesn't play this year, which you're starting to hear rumblings about them playing, not that the Big Ten caved, but this isn't the MAC taking a season off. We're talking like Power 5 teams here. I mean, even though everyone cracks on the Pac-12, Oregon, USC, like we've got some major teams out there just not going to suit up for a season, man. It's so sad to see. And I really hope that the Pac-12 figures something out as well. And I'm hearing something about more like Thanksgiving with them, but why can't they do the Big Ten timeline? Why can't they get on it with that? I have a feeling politically it's a little more difficult out there. I think politically you're you had a little more sympathies in the Midwest than you do on the West Coast. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, Nick. But one thing in regards, I just want to get back into the Big Ten. It definitely doesn't help when you have the Cincinnati Bengals and the Cleveland Browns playing a Thursday night game with fans in the stands.
Right.
I mean, granted, I know it's the NFL, and the NFL has lots and lots of money. It's a multi-billionaire corporation and company or whatever. Right. But once again, like the players, they're seeing that they're seeing Joe Burrow, 1 year removed from winning the Heisman Trophy, throw 61 times for 3 touchdowns and no interceptions. They're watching that, so they're saying, hey, Joe Burrow, he was with us last year. So I mean, we kind of want to get to that point where he's at in his life or his career in the NFL. So I think that's what the players are seeing. They're seeing the NFL games. They're seeing the Sun Belt Conference play. They're actually seeing the Sun Belt Conference playing like a Power 5 conference, especially for that first week with all the wins that they racked up. But once again, it comes down to the players. And I think, the decision, it was definitely based on, safety and health. But once again, it was definitely based on the players getting back on the field and just the political, the monetary value of everything that's surrounding everything. So I just think the Big Ten got it right. I really did.
Yeah, and again, like good for them to acknowledge like, hey, things have changed. We're changing course, especially in a day and age where everyone just digs in on their side and doesn't budge at all. But it's good that Joe Burrow is safe. It's almost like his college football coach knew how to take care of him or something.
Yeah, like I mean,
don't question how I take care of my players.
I just don't want to wow, I'm so enamored with Joe Burrow. I mean, I know it's only been 2 games, but I know we're talking about the Big Ten. But hey, he was part of the Big Ten, being transferring from Ohio State, so he does have some Big Ten ties in there. But yeah, I just think the Big Ten got this right, Nick. Once again, I think Kevin Warren was definitely the fall guy earlier on in this process. I don't know how much command he had to actually come down and make the decision. I think he was just, making a decision based on, what the presidents and what his peers pretty much came to the table with. But once again, I think they got it right. And hopefully they can come out with the schedule. Hopefully it won't be any delays where they will have to make up games. And we have a full, fledged football season, a full-fledged college football playoffs.
The Big Ten's back. The Big Ten is back. So pumped. So pumped. Robert, you got any final thoughts?
I just want to talk about, the Shaun Wade opt-in and the Wyatt Davis opt-in and the Rashad Bateman opt-in. I think that says a lot for, the culture that PJ Fleck and Ryan Day has created. When you have, your best players who opted out, who's, quote unquote, definitely is going to probably be a first round pick, maybe, not top 10 pick, but a definitely first round pick saying, hey, we want to play, we want to come back. I think that says a lot, for the culture that's surrounding that program and recruits that's coming in. So I think that's the thing that I look at out of all of this, especially those, high caliber players opting back in.
Yeah, I mean, that's the first thing after you heard they were playing, you're like, man, I wish too bad the teams aren't going to be at full strength. So to hear that these guys are so eager to jump back in, that's awesome.
Yeah, it really is. The only thing that wouldn't be awesome about it, knock on wood, one of those, high profile guys who opted back in, somehow gets injured and have a, season ending injury. I don't wish that upon none of these guys, but that would be disheartening. But once again, just like we talked about the GM from the Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm pretty sure a lot of these players are privy to the same articles and the conversations that we talk about in regards to these GMs saying, hey, we want a player who's played. We want a player who has film out there. We don't necessarily want to look at 2019 film. We want to look at, more recent film, because at the end of the day, the GMs and the coaches and, the front office personnel, their jobs are on the line too. So they want to draft the right players for the team and the right players for the system so they can have a job moving forward to, for their livelihood and to feed their families. And I'm pretty sure the players are thinking the same way. And I think Shaun Wade, Wyatt Davis, Rashad Bateman just made a business decision to say,
Yep.
hey, I do need to put, more game film out there for these GMs and for these, front office execs and personnels. So I think they made a business decision when they opted out, and they're making a business decision again when they opting back in. So I think that's kind of how you have to look at it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I really hope that this is a no-brainer decision that the NCAA does not drag their feet on. Like, we don't need to be coming down the week before these games at the end of October and wondering, are they still going to play? So I really hope they get it right. I think they will.
So I just wanted to jump back in, Nick. So out of all the players that's opting back in, which player do you think, bodes well to say, hey, we really needed this guy, and I think he can make a big difference out of all those guys who opted back in?
Well, officially, from what I've heard, I mean, I have to think that Rashad Bateman at Minnesota, just the type of weapon he is. I mean, as great as Shaun Wade is, as great as Wyatt Davis is, Ohio State has players all over the field, right? But Rashad Bateman is a real difference maker for that Gophers offense. So if he could play for Minnesota this fall, I'd go with Rashad Bateman. How about you, Rob?
I mean, if you're Tanner Morgan, like, how excited can you be right now?
Yeah.
And once again, Tanner Morgan is one of those quarterbacks who's on the cusp of like, okay, can he be a high draft quarterback pick in the next year's draft, or can he be that guy who can be a backup in the NFL? And I think having your number one receiver come back and actually being able to throw him the ball, it takes a lot of pressure off of you and it makes you look good. So I think Tanner Morgan is probably one of the happiest guys out there when he heard the news of Rashad Bateman opting back in.
Yeah, I definitely think that PJ Fleck was probably excited too, but PJ Fleck's always excited, so it's hard to tell.
Yeah, he's always excited. So you're right about that. It's kind of hard to tell, but I know one coach that was excited, Ryan Day. I know when Shaun Wade, announced the fact that he was opting back in, I know Ryan Day said, hey, shout outs to one of the best in the country. So Ryan Day has touted, his own Shaun Wade, the best corner in the country. So once again, we shall see if he gets drafted as the number one corner, like his counterpart in Pierre Kuda did last year, moving forward. But we shall see. But I think Ryan Day is definitely excited. And if you're Tanner Morgan and you PJ Fleck, I'm pretty sure you're excited as well.
Yeah, and I think as the season progresses and we get a little more film to analyze and see who's actually playing this season, we'll start to do what we're going to be heavy into the NFL draft. So we'll start to do a little more specific scouting breakdowns as we go. But Shaun Wade's definitely a guy we have an eye on. All right, we're going to go on to the Did You Know portion of our show. This final segment, Robert, you're on the hot seat tonight. The Did You Know question of the day, presented by Coach Paint, is which Big Ten school became the first repeat NCAA football champion since the AP poll began in 1936? Which Big Ten school became the first repeat NCAA football champion since the AP poll began in 1936?
Oof. Wow.
American Football Stories is presented to you by Coach Paint. Coach Paint offers the ability to clearly tell a straight video while increasing retention of information in a shorter amount of time. Up your game today with Coach Paint. Robert, which Big Ten school became the first repeat NCAA football champion since the AP poll began in 1936? And I know this is a competition between us. We're keeping track on our website on the podcast section of AmericanFootballStories.com, which, by the way, feel free to visit our website, AmericanFootballStories.com. Follow us on Twitter at AmericanFBStory. That's AmericanFBStory on Twitter. And ask us one of these questions, too, if you want. If you got questions for us, let us know. But which Big Ten school became the first repeat NCAA football champion since the AP poll began in 1936? And I know it's competition between us. We do track the score between Robert and I. But we also try to help each other out because we'll ask ridiculous questions like what happened, since the AP poll began in 1936. So my hint for you today, Robert, my friendly hint, because you'll give me a friendly hint at some point, is it is not Ohio State or Michigan.
Wow.
Which to me, that's more than a friendly hint.
Yeah, I tell you what, that's where I was leaning towards Ohio State. I mean, I know we've pretty much been talking about them this whole segment. That was definitely going to be my first response, Ohio State. Wow.
Nope, I narrowed it down. I narrowed it down to 12. I narrowed it down to 12 for you.
Wow. No Ohio
Let's just
State.
talk through it. It's
Michigan.
It's probably not Rutgers, right?
Oh, definitely not Rutgers. Definitely not Maryland.
No.
No Ohio State. No Michigan. Kind of want to throw maybe Michigan State in there. Maybe Michigan State, Nebraska.
Which way you leaning? You got any other schools in mind? No Hawkeyes. No, you're not looking out west. You're not looking east a little more with Purdue or anybody.
Wow. You know what? I think I'm gonna go with final answer. I'm gonna go with the Iowa Hawkeyes.
The Iowa Hawkeyes. I didn't influence that, did I? That's your answer. You got that on your own.
That was my answer.
Okay, because I just said Iowa, and then you said Iowa. I didn't want to make sure you're not going to blame me on this. So you're not too far off geographically. It's the Minnesota Golden Gophers.
Wow.
They're the first repeat NCAA football champion since the AP poll began in 1936. And Rob, normally I do my homework better than this. I should have come prepared with the years on this, right?
Yeah,
Football,
I mean,
let me talk to the Google real quick. All right, Minnesota national championship football seasons. Claimed national titles: 1904, 1934, 1935, 1936, 1940, and 1941 were the back-to-backs. And 1960 was the last national title that Minnesota's won. The Golden Gophers have 7 national titles to their name. Oh, I don't think a lot of people know that.
I mean, I definitely don't think a lot of people know that. I mean, granted, it's been a while,
right.
But once again, that's an impressive feat. I don't think it's too many universities out there with multiple national titles. So that's definitely an impressive feat for the Minnesota Golden Gophers.
Yeah, for the record, I kind of just want to see how many national titles. How many national titles does Michigan have? That'd be a nice little comparison there. Football, 11. Michigan has 11 national titles in football.
Yeah, and that's why you're entering the blue blood area when you have that many national championships.
All right. Bonus question, Robert. How many national titles does Michigan have since 1930?
1930, 11 total. I'm gonna go with 4.
Close, 5.
5.
They won in 32, 33, 47, 48, and then they didn't win one until 1997, and folks in Lincoln, Nebraska might not even say they won it then.
You're right about that one.
Yeah, so your first 6 national titles, University of Michigan, 1901, 1902, 1903, 1904, and 1918 during the last pandemic, in 1923. So 6 of your 11 national titles at Michigan. 11's a nice number, but 6 of them came before the stock market crashed in the 20s. So just keep that in mind. Keep that in mind next time.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's definitely been a while.
It's been a minute. Good history, though. Good history. But anyway, Robert, we can't give you credit for that. The scoreboard is tied 1-1 between us, and I have the chance to take the lead on the next episode on Sunday night, and I'm pretty fired up about it.
Don't worry. Definitely going to try to stump you during our next episode. Got a great did you know question for you. I think you should get it, Nick, but I'm going to try to, spice it up a little bit, kind of throw you off a little bit.
Just
but
remember
I definitely
how friendly my hints are.
I definitely
how friendly hints.
I definitely give you a friendly hint, though. I give you that.
All right, man. That's fair. All right, Rob. If you don't have anything else, you want to read us out?
Sure. So we would just like to thank the audience for listening to American Football Stories. Once again, we are powered by Coach Paint. Beef up your scouting clips with Coach Paint. Please follow us on Spotify, YouTube, Twitter, and rate us 5 stars, and tune in to next week's episode. Actually, not next week's episode, Sunday night's episode, after we pretty much break down the NFL. So I will see you again on Sunday, Nick.
Talk to you Sunday night, Rob.
The Big Tens.